short story render themselves as major challenges to the writer while composing a short story. The ability to convey an idea concisely yet effectively requires the highest order of language skill, and this places short story writing a peg above the rest of the art forms. In an age of brevity, where does short story stand as a genre? How does it match compared to other forms of literature? And where is it headed towards? The answers to these questions will be discussed in the panel, where we have Mr. Arun Kaul. He's veteran wing commander retired, whose academic background is a unique blend of English literature and management. Commander Kaul has served the Indian Air Force. He has been the group head HR with Urban Mills and has written a book of life stories, Only One Life to Give. On this panel, we also have Ms. Kiran Manral, a noted journalist, novelist, and one of India's top bloggers. Her novels include The Reluctant Detective and Once Upon a Crush, All Aboard. She has also recently authored a book on parenting titled Karmic Kids, The Story of Parenting Nobody Told You, and another, The Face at the Window. We also have Mr. Sumant Batra, corporate and policy lawyer of global eminence, but popularly known for his initiatives such as Kaul Literature Festival, Taj Kalafim, and Dalit Literature Festival, among others. He is the author of the best-selling coffee table book, The Indians. This distinguished panel would be moderated by Koral Dasgupta, an author, columnist, academician, editorial consultant, and art patron, and founder of a boutique storytelling platform, tellmeyourstory.in. She is also an advisory member of Central Board of Film Certification. On behalf of Ahmedabad International Literature Festival, I welcome the panel. Thank you very much.
Short story is a very unique form of literature, and to start with, given that I have myself started a platform which curates short stories from across the world, getting people across age, professions and geographies to write stories, either stuff that appeared in their mind or things that are scooped out from real life. I do have an understanding that short stories are a unique expression of telling the world things that are happening with you or around you. So with that thought, we start the discussion, and we would like to know, I would first come to Mr. Batra, who along with his own writing assignments, he is one of such observers who finds a lot of people writing, and he celebrates that through myriad platforms. So I wanted this discussion to start on that mode. That do you think that short stories is one way in which there has been communication overload and too much of expressions and too much of use of words, and short stories is probably literary and in a way which readers have also chosen for us to cut back on the expressions and say things to the point?
Well, I think that it's certainly, of course, could be one of the reasons that short stories are popular, that people have paucity of time. You can read one story, you don't have to flag the book. You come to one story, you can read another at any point in time. Number of other reasons, but I believe that short stories are something which were always there, except that now they appear in written form. They were earlier in the form of oral traditions. That was the perhaps only medium through which various traditions and values were passed on from generation to generation. In earlier sessions today, like for example in my biology session, we heard that how in Mahabharata there are layers and layers of story. There are stories around every character, every episode. These were told to us, we have learned them in the form of stories. And everybody had a very different way of telling their story. So, earlier also, they were told for a particular point in time in a day, like a bedtime story. It was a short story because something which a child would want to get in 10 minutes or 15 minutes before the child goes to sleep. So the purpose was different, the pressures were different. Now those may have changed a little bit, but the short stories are there, have been there, and they continue to be there. And I don't think that's the only reason that the short stories, because of the paucity of time, are more popular or are there for people to read. I think there are plenty of more reasons as well.
Mr. Kaul, I'll come to you. Having come from, a very migrant background, you have been with the Air Force, you have served the corporate. How do you react to stories which appear in every life in bits and parcels and which are just rampant everywhere? How do we document such stories into short stories? Because they are very much available.
Of course, like you said, I've been through various areas, starting with the services, then I went on to textile, came to health sector. Not just that, even when I go back in life, there have been stories in everything you see around. There is story in almost everything. But one must understand, let's first define stories. Stories are limited in terms of number, it's supposed to be read in one sitting, and it's supposed to deliver a message. The earlier session talked about grays, shades of grays, white and black. I think the stories are more white and black. There is a protagonist, maybe one or two. There is either just one incident or a series of incidents around that particular protagonist. And by the end of those 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words, a message is delivered, a learning happens, and it teaches you something. And that's how the story genre is not competing with the longer version of a novel. But the distinction is that this is direct, it delivers a message, while a novel, in my own understanding, delivers an experience. Of course, a novel is an extended short story, but it delivers an experience rather than now what happens with an individual, especially with me, my first book of short stories is called Only One Life to Give. And it chronicles and takes down, of course, the message I wanted to deliver. I was personally going through a very traumatic period of time in life. I had come out of the services where life is about white and black. There are no shades of grey, there are no shades at all. And when you come into a different area, you see different things which you've not seen earlier. So I was passing through a phase which unsettled me, in the sense that I was very disappointed with what I saw around. In a way, in the services we are protected and we are contained. We have our own lifestyles and we don't know what's happening around. So when I came out, and of course there were a series of things which happened in my personal life around me, which thoroughly disappointed me, and I sort of lost my mental equilibrium. And it was then that I went over my life. I recollected people, I recollected incidents, I recollected deeds which people had done in circumstances of difficult odds. And they have been my icons in some way or the other, whether it's been a chaiwala or, it didn't matter who he was. But as long as I learned and I found a message, and when I recollected these people, I wrote one or two stories. They said, why should I compile it? Because by the end of writing the 10-12 stories, I was back to my mental equilibrium. But I said, if it can serve a purpose to me, I'm sure it can serve a purpose to everybody. So I have seen stories everywhere. Well, maybe some people are more perceptive. It's not a degree of perception, it's a degree of how one is made. And I saw stories in almost everything. This first book chronicles a set of stories from the Air Force, set of stories from my personal life, set of stories from friends. But the common thread is about goodness in people, about integrity, about value systems. That's something.
Kiran, I mean, you have been an established author. 60,000, 70,000, 90,000 word manuscripts have been nothing for you. Given that background, what well does a short story bring in your life? I mean, from 60,000 words to maybe less than 5,000?
Koral, to be very honest, what is a short story? The short story is a medium that probably started when? When would any of you hazard a guess? When did the short story start? It started when people sat in the caves around a fire telling each other a story. When language was just being created. When man was trying to find his place in the universe. So the short story has always been there. It is just that we kept adding words to it and made it a novel. So from the tales around the fire to the Panchatantra and the Jataka tales to the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer to the legends that we have, Veer Ranja, Shirin Farhad, these are all short stories. To the 1001 Nights, we've had short stories, we've had a huge, rich history of short stories. So for me, I grew up on short stories. And as you cut your teeth as a child reading short stories, you eventually graduate to the longer form as a reader. So short story is, as someone very rightly put it, it's a kiss in the dark from a stranger. It's short, it's to the point, you don't know what's coming. It affects you in a very visceral way. It's completely different from a novel where you have to sink your teeth into it. And really, as a writer, I would say have the luxury of building up your plot, your character. No, in a short story, you have just that much in which you need to experiment and that much in which you need to convey the scenario, the background. You have to use your words with care. Of course, you know all about it. The thing is, in a short story, I haven't had any published short stories except for in magazines, so not in anthologies. But I read a lot of short stories. And I think to me as a writer, I find it immensely challenging because I've been spoiled by the novel, the form, completely spoiled. You have 90,000 words, as you say, to play. To condense all that characterization, plot, language, context, background into 3,000 words, it is immensely challenging, and I have immense respect for short story writers like Saki, even P.G. Woodhouse, Edgar Allan Poe, our own Manto, Peruttal and Haidar. How do you get so much context in so little words? In that economy, in that scale, in that background, in that richness is what makes the short story come alive.
I remember when I was in school, our teacher, our English teacher, had given us she didn't say what we should write. She just said, write something on the wall. And that's all she said. So I remember one boy wrote an essay. Essay means just a 2-3 sentence on the wall is blocking, it could have been a window and it's blocking and I can't see outside. And there was one guy who wrote an autobiography of the wall. And there was a third guy who had written a story basically, that this wall, something, some life that has happened and this wall has some role to play. So, do you think, Sumant, short stories are actually one way of expression for all these three kind of writers?
Well, certainly they are. In fact, I think they, as Kiran also mentioned, that they are probably more powerful because of the reason that it sort of brings out the art of a punch. It's like a punch because you mentioned that it is expected to be read in one sitting, and you concise all what a novel takes in 85,000, 9,000, 95,000 words, whatever, into 1,200, 1,400 words. So therefore it comes to you as a punch, depending on who's writing and what subject you're writing. What of course amazes me is that you could also, on the same subject, properly write in many, many different ways. You can come across the way. There's a deep sort of very recently experienced that. As you know that we run this short story contest, it's an international short story contest on nature writing. Because in order to revive interest in nature, in order to sensitize people about nature, we started this international short story contest on nature writing. We received 187 stories, and each one was better than the other. I mean, in the word limit of is 1400, 1800 that we provided. I mean, it's amazingly kind of stories that have come across on that one subject itself. And it could go on and on. It does the number depending on how much time you need for people to write. So I mean, it's just a whole universe out there, and I think it's a very powerful medium. We need to make a more effective use of this medium to advance some of the social issues, to bring the spotlight on various other things, because they are very impressionable, and especially if read by younger children who are more vulnerable, they can really serve a very great purpose.
Mr. Kaul, you have written a series of short stories, so we would probably want to know from you that does short story in some way restrict a writer's liberty to play with language because it has a word constraint? Of course, nobody is telling you that you have to finish it within 3,000 words, but a story, I mean, when we write novels, it is a story adaptive which we have the liberty of flowing across to and fro, and linearly, non-linearly. What is it for you?
I can only speak for myself, and it gives me a chance to think whether a person's style, I don't know, people are more experienced in this area, whether a person's style of writing, which is his voice, helps in the genre of story writing. I'll give you just two examples. If you go back to, say, Eric Seeger, Love Story, and if you see the conversational style of writing which he has, or even if you go back to Ernest Hemingway, and if you dwell on their style of writing, is it more suitable for a short story? I don't know. It's a question which I'm posing. I would like to believe that I have a similar style of writing. I probably have been influenced by them greatly. And I find writing a short story my cup of tea. Now, you can see it half full or half empty. We are saying that, of course, we are not comparing the genres and the creativity in the genres, but to getting it concise and to deliver a message, to portray a character and characterize him in those very words without, having the luxury of the number of words, makes it more intense. And it's like an atom bomb. The smaller it gets, probably the nuclear energy it releases is more. So that's why I thought of that.
Given all these 4-word story, 6-word story, Juggernaut app, where I loved the app with the concise number of words which make a story, just because both these categories are actually taking us away from an age-old habit of turning through the pages and lavishing ourselves through the language, through the time that we spend on a particular story. So, your take.
Koral, technology has always changed the way we consume literature. So when the printing press came in, we went from the handwritten book and the Bible to start with, and then eventually other manuscripts became more accessible to the lay person. Similarly with technology, as you say, how did the short story come about? Just a brief history. In the 19th century, with the industrial age and the printing press coming in, the short stories began to be serialized in newspapers and magazines. So that's how the form became popular. Now we have another leap of technology, we have the digital age. So naturally we are going to see an evolution in terms of the way literature is consumed. And because of conflicting messages that we're bombarded with all the time, it needs to get more concise and it needs to grab you immediately in a more visceral, in a more immediate way than it had the luxury of doing earlier with a longer short story, we have something called Terribly Tiny Tales, which is a short story in 2 or 3 sentences, which is fabulous. I mean, it's an exercise in brevity that astounds me every time I go to that site, because to think about how a sentence or two can tell an entire tale. They're 6-word sentences, 6-word stories. The most famous of them being For Sale Baby Shoes Never Worn. So that's a story by itself. It makes you think, it makes you ponder what happened. Did the baby not get born? Was the baby born and did the baby die? What happened? It sets off a trigger of thoughts in your mind. That is what exactly technology is doing. It's shortening the story, but it's making the reader think, ponder. Apps like Jagannath, I think what they're doing is fabulous, because they're taking an entire story, a narrative, and they're condensing it into bite-sized short stories. So the stories are standalone by themselves if read, and you can buy them at 10 rupees per story, or you can buy them at whatever, I think 130 for the entire book. So it gives the reader, it understands that the reader might not want an entire book at a time, but may be traveling at a point and may want to read one short story. So whatever makes a reader read, I am all for it, very honestly. We need more readers. On the flip, just to extend my time a little more, publishers are very reluctant to publish anthologies of short stories because they don't really sell that well. So, as an author, when you write, I mean, that is something that we always have to keep in mind. Publishers do not touch short stories with a barge pole unless you're really established or you have a collection of very big names in your anthology.
Well, I think because the popular perception has been that short stories are best read in Reader's Digest. I mean, that's how, the popular perception has been. And I agree, that's very challenging to, persuade a publisher to an anthology of short stories because it doesn't sell. And that's where probably technology comes in, because short stories are so easily otherwise accessible for people through magazines, through other publications, and also through online media. So people feel that, as long as they're freely available there, easily accessible there, why do they need to go and buy something? Yeah. And also it's sometimes also the fact that, people feel, I'll finish that in 20 minutes, so what's the point of investing in it? There are various reasons which raise the minds of the reader. I just also want to very briefly comment about what Kiran was mentioning about, the shortest of stories, the brevity of it. And I think all that is also a part of evolution, as Kiran explained, and I think that's also going to be there, we should accept it. Of course, we can always question the punctuation, we can always question the grammar, we can think they were questioned even then, Shakespeare didn't become popular in his lifetime, we always challenge, and I think we should continue to challenge, but we should also accept the reality that technology is here to stay for some time, and they would, we would still have something else which may be
Those people who are following me or my venture, tell me your story. So I try to find out that who are these people who are even interested without knowing who are. I mean, most of these people are foreigners. So I assume that they don't know me or they don't know about my venture, but still they are following. So many of the times I find that these are the people who just pick up a paper format, and on that, like a typewriter format of font, they will just type 1 or 2 sentences and those become stories, and they have millions of likes. So that gets me thinking that what kind of generation of readers are we coming through? Mr. Kaul, when you write short stories, you probably come from your learning, your experiences, things that you have gone through, which probably may or may not make sense to the kids of today. Kids, I mean the youth. Of course, even I am a youth, but then people who are going to college, people who are starting their journey as a reader, adult reader. So, what I wanted to ask you is that, do you write for yourself or do you think of readers while writing your short stories?
You see, when we come to short stories, you are delivering a message. You're giving a learning. And learnings are universal. They're not for a bracket of age group. When I wrote this book had to be at my age. But I also knew that this is a book which should influence children. Incidentally, it has been picked up by NCERT and they want to put it in the syllabus. And very surprisingly, when it went out, most of the people who read it were children. You know, I was very, very surprised one day somebody rang me locally. Two instances I'll give you. One is a hotel owner rang up. He opened a new hotel and said, I want 40 books. I got 40 rooms. So I got 40 books. I could understand how a book which talks of morality, value systems. So I asked him, I said, first of all, how did you come to read it? He says, frankly, I didn't. My daughter told me to buy it and keep it in the rooms. That was the first one. Second, I got an invite to speak to ISRO. The director HRD rang up and they had invited certain celebrity who couldn't come. So when I asked him, I said, when did you read my book? He said, frankly, I did. It was my daughter who read it. And the feedback which I've got over a period of time is primarily from that age group, which I would like them to be influenced. Not that the elders have not been influenced, but because, you know, we are at fault ourselves, so probably the children are more innocent and they'd like to. So that's the influence. And I hope this mass attendance is not a reflection of the interest in short stories. You see, short stories, there have been certain evolutionary processes which have affected short stories. Like she said, they were oral, the stories. So when printing came into place, it was very small technology, small words, small length of. So the short stories were a genre which was tailored to the printing process at that point in time. And that is how it got evolved over a period of time. Similarly, even for the reader, if you see short stories are initially read by children, and then they graduate to other longer forms. Coming to even the writer, I mean, you will see a lot of writers who start with short stories, and then graduate to the longer form. Even if you see Premchand, he's famous for short stories, but then he wrote the longer. If you see Kushwant Singh, you see anyone else, I think it's also an evolutionary process in all the three facets. The printing was one, which now the technology is going to drive it. The reading age group is another, and the writing artists. So all these three will probably influence that.
Well, I just want to make one quick comment. I mean, I think yes, of course, many stories were initially written to convey a message, but I think lately the stories have been written for entertaining purpose also, for just light reading also. I mean, I know one of my friends is authored an anthology. There's 23 stories. These are all horror stories. One is better than the other. I mean, it's just amazing. He just thought that, you know, there were things that we wanted to write about. I mean, there's superstitions, you know, all these kind of things. So there's no message out of them, but they're very powerful stories. They haunt you. They also come out of our traditions, our beliefs. So I think short stories have also graduated to becoming much beyond just messages now.
We are lacking time, so there's one concluding question that I would put across primarily to you, Sumant, and of course to Kiran and Mr. Kaul as well. That some of us writers are doing our job to promote literature. We are writing our heart out because we believe in our concepts and we believe in writing as a whole. There are readers who are interested, who are reading, who are doing their job, giving us our consideration which we deserve. Is there anything else? I mean, you are doing, I am doing, we are helping others to write, we are trying to promote them. We derive happiness when we find a new writer has come up with a good concept, with a good story. That you are doing at a massive scale, I am doing at my scale. Is there anything else which is still left, which probably the audience here can go home with, some kind of insight that they can also add?
This is a very difficult question because, you know, I don't want to be prescriptive. You know, we all have our choices as to what we want to do in life, what we want to read. You know, I mean, I've said in the morning, in my talk, my thought process on this is, I just would like to say two things. You know, please save the bookstores in your cities from shutting down. Please visit libraries more often. Now these are two things which any city should be proud of. You know, if you go to the biggest cities around the world, the most iconic buildings in those cities are the libraries. And for us, we will talk. For us, a city's landmark, now the biggest mall, steel, brick, glass. And I think that's what we probably need to do as responsible citizens. We need to preserve and conserve the libraries and bookstores in our cities. Save them from dying out.
Taking from what he said is, going back to our own past, and interestingly, one of the newspapers reviews is called book tasting. We got book tasting in school, and I remember that in our school, I'm from Xavier's Jaipur, there was compulsory class for library. Okay, and it was not to refer syllabus books, it was purely and only creative writing and literature, and they had all catering to all classes. So it is, I think the focus somewhere in studies is also to be on reading. Though of course there are so many other forms of reading now that is there, and I'm sure children are going to be seeing all that. But if we at a nascent age, an age group where give them a book tasting, then it's for them whether they want to take it forward or not. I think we as parents or elders, I mean, we may be promoting our peers or we may be encouraging writers and all that. But what about the younger generation which needs to get this taste, whichever way, could be Kindle, which comes a little later. But I think we need to inculcate this more in the children so that they take it more as a habit.
Ravi, we have to put an end to the session. Kiran, would you like to draw any insight what would you like to say on this before we wind up?
I agree completely with Sumant and Mr. Kaul that yes, we desperately need to patronize bookstores. All the independent bookstores, as you know, in all the cities are shutting down, and it's really terrible to read every other day that some independent bookstore in Delhi, in Bombay, in Lucknow, all the iconic stores are just shutting down and the chain stores are out there, and we all know the collection that chain stores have. So, and Mr. Kaul too, because the habit of reading, if it doesn't come from the home itself, from the school itself, it's never going to happen. As a parent, I've tried my best to make my child read, and I've been a failure at it. I'm sorry, but that has been my greatest regret of my life. But he's a physical child. He's not a child who reads. He has other mediums. He's more into the visual medium, more into running around, more active. But what I'd like to say is, as a reader, spread the joy of books. Talk about books. Make books cool again. Books are not cool. Even at the school level, my son, the other kids who read are seen as nerds. Therefore, the other kids who might be curious about a book will not pick up a book because they don't want to be seen as nerdy. They want to be cool. To be cool is to play football or to play cricket and not to read. So make reading books cool again. Talk about books. Talk about a good book you read. Join book groups. Start WhatsApp book groups where you discuss books. Have a book club in your neighborhood, in your city, in your building complex. We have kitty parties all the time. Why can't we have book parties? So do your little bit.
Thank you, audience, for being patient with us. Anybody have any questions? Please.
I've been reading mostly short stories because in today's time, we had only a limited amount of time, don't get the luxury of a novel. So, what I've observed is the award-winning authors like Alice Munro, who got Nobel Prize in 2013, and Alice Smith, a Scottish author. I read their short stories. Most of them don't have story. It's probably some description or some event, and I think world over they are more going for short stories which have a linear content, like these are 2 characters, maximum 3 characters. So is that killing the short story because there is no story? So readers are being discouraged to read those kind of stories.
to comment on that, there has been a lot of experimentation with the form of the short story in the past century. And it has definitely moved from the linear to the stylistic to character explorations. Now, to divide the short story, I won't take much time. There is the sketch and there is the tale. The tale is the story which has a beginning, a middle and an end, and some sort of catharsis in the process, some sort of realization. Your sketch can be anything. It can be a sketch of an event, a sketch of a character, a sketch of a situation that the protagonist finds in. So these are the two primarily divides that the short story finds itself on. And there will be an audience for the tale, there will be an audience for the sketch. So it depends on what kind of a reader you are, I think. And you just need to find the author who writes the kind of short stories that you like. You have Murakami who writes really surreal novels, and his short stories are also as surreal. So they may not have a beginning and end, a conclusion and a narrative, but if you've enjoyed the form and the structure of the work in the bigger works, you might enjoy the short stories. I think as a reader, it is up to you to find the authors who fit in with what you enjoy.
So, any further questions? Just make sure that they don't exit. Go them right there and ask your questions individually. And we will bring this to an end.
Thank you very much. The latter part of the discussion reminds me of a quote by Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite authors. People think that stories are made by people. In fact, it's the other way around. Thank you very much, panelists and moderator, for this wonderful session. I will ask Aarti Motwani to present the panel with the mementos.
Short story.